Hello everyone, I'm Wendell Jones and welcome to this edition of the program, The Platform. On this program, we examine national issues. It has been said that we are living in an oral society, a word-of-mouth society. And Bahamians just talk to one another and they have a conversation and they try to educate one another that way. But today, the 8th of September, is International Literacy Day. And we need to be more literate as a society. Indeed, we need to examine the rate of literacy in our country and encourage our young in particular to read more. Indeed, the entire society should be reading a little more. And then we'd become a better educated society. On this program today, I am going to be speaking with a veteran educator, someone who has been on our show before, and it is always a delight to have her as our guest. And I'm talking about a former permanent secretary in the Ministry of Education, Mrs. Elma Garraway. She is considered to be here today to speak to us about education and all that sort of thing, and it's a wonderful pleasure to have you here again.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I always enjoy coming because you've got such a wide-ranging knowledge of education, the concerns of the society, and it makes it easier for us to just have this conversation.
Absolutely.
Again. So thank you for asking me.
Thank you so very much. And you were in Long Island recently?
Oh, I was in Long Island, and we talked about international literacy. The primary school principals were meeting with their district superintendent to examine their GLAT results and to see what else they can do. Well, I stopped by on matters pertaining to Girl Guides, and of course they shared with me what they were doing, and they are so delighted with the results of the schools in Long Island. In areas there was 100% they had an A to D category. I said, no, I want to see an A to C category, and overall more than 90% of their children, both at the 3rd and the 6th grades, are reading on or above grade level. One principal told me, and I wouldn't say the name of the school, there was a kid who was reading at grade 13 at the 6th grade.
Wow.
So you see, emphasis in the islands, and I'm sure that's not only true of Long Island. It would be true of many of our family islands and several of the schools here in New Providence where the teachers do give attention to the literacy, because you know I know you're going to ask me that, so I'd go into the question.
Yes, but
what is literacy?
Yes.
To me, literacy is the fundamental building blocks of first listening, speaking, reading, writing, thinking, problem solving, decision making, numeracy, technological development, career choices, and of course then quality of life, lifelong learning. That is what literacy is. So it's more than just the reading, writing, and the arithmetic. It is the basis for our development as human beings and as a society.
And if we had a better literate society, a more literate society, the quality of life would be better.
And the quality of life as it pertains to the decisions which our people, and especially our young men, make.
Yes, absolutely.
That they would think before. They would recognize the results of their behaviors. And of course, they'd have a vision for themselves because the opportunities are here for it.
Tell me, why you think we as a people are not reading, Mrs. Garraway?
As much as we should?
As much as we should.
I'm on your show, but it is a fact. The media, the technology has overtaken the whole role of reading in the development of our people. You know, in radio, you came from a radio tradition.
Yes.
When there were those stories on radio, you had to stop and just imagine what the scenes were like, what the persons who were speaking, the environment. But with the event of television, you don't have to think anymore. But we have allowed it to do so. I think it can be a wonderful complement to the older traditions of teaching and the reading, but we have allowed it to take over all aspects of our lives.
And then there are a good number of people who are able to read silently or to themselves. But in terms of reading out aloud, there's tremendous difficulty in reading out aloud.
And you know where that comes from? We as a people have stopped. Some of the churches still do. If you recall, the reading out aloud was really birthed in the whole idea that a lot of people were not able to read.
Right.
And that books were not as available. You know, books only came, what, the printing press only came around in what, the early, what, 11, say 13, Gutenberg and his press.
Right.
So that was very early.
Yes,
I mean,
in the West, that is, because the Chinese
they
were
had,
earlier.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But
and the Egyptians.
so in churches where we have people called out the words, there were the recitations, there was the reciting of the Psalms and the hymns, and even in school, when I went to school, Friday was a wonderful time.
Yes.
We learned those poems, you know, those short and narrative poems.
Yes.
And those who are older than I am, the royal reading, the
royal readers, yes.
And so you were able to speak and read, and you had oral presentation skills. We still do it. In a lot of schools, they do it, especially at assembly time, and give the Ministry of Youth its credit for in the National Arts Festival, there is still a section for the oral presentation, the choral speaking, and our teachers do give emphasis to, but not enough.
But so in that regard then, our educators have not done over the last 20, 30 years what they should have done in terms of getting our people to be a more literate people. Yes?
We needed to continue to hold on to those wonderful traditions that were proven and tried and on which we grew. But there were the newer traditions of the whole language and the integration that some of them were left behind. But nowadays, there's some wonderful officers of literacy now in the Ministry of Education. For instance, Van Ray Jackson, there's Avis Lightburn in the secondary school, and they have given renewed focus to those aspects of the development of the language which were neglected. And if you listen to even our sports persons, you know, our athletes, when they are now interviewed, our police officers, and many of our persons in general, there is an improvement in the language.
You really think so?
There is.
Because you know, I hear a lot of gibberage.
Yes, and what people call Wolf Road language. But it is improving, Mr. Jones. It is, the process of education is very slow. It is a very slow process.
Because I am amazed, Mrs. Garraway, with the number of young Bahamians who have difficulty expressing themselves. And they have difficulty expressing themselves principally because they do not read.
And they do not have the vocabulary.
They don't have
a
vocabulary to express themselves.
Probably you have not noticed it, but I'm sure if you do a little survey, an informal one, by and large, the public would have noticed a gradual improvement in the oral skills. It's nowhere near what it should be. But it's growing.
I hear you, and there are some people who would disagree with you.
I know many would, because it's nowhere near the standard it should be. But we have to celebrate the incremental steps.
Because, Mrs. Garraway, we believe that the level of violence is what it is in the community, because young people do not know how to express themselves. They're not able to resolve conflicts because of their limited vocabulary and the inability to express themselves properly. And all of this has to do with education.
That's one aspect of it. That's one aspect. And we know that this literacy is developed very early. I don't remember the study that was done in preschools in Chicago. It is a landmark study. I know Jamaica utilized it, the University of the West Indies, and I know a politician used it in Parliament some time ago, of the importance of preschool and early language development in the elimination of criminality and the development of the self-esteem of our people. When I come again, I'm going to bring a synopsis of that study.
Yes.
It really is landmark. And you're on target, but that's only one aspect of it, you know. There are many other aspects.
The other aspects, there was a time when people weren't able to read, especially those who grew up in the family islands in the 20s and the 30s, whose education limited. They weren't able to read, but they behaved properly. They were socialized
and
well.
And you know why? The village raised them. The village supported them. There were those in the community, and do not minimize the role of the church.
Of the church.
The church, the administrators, the head teachers they were at the time, teachers, and the community leaders as a whole, but whichever church they belonged to. They ensured that people's social behaviors were what they should be.
So the spiritual grounding from the church.
It made a significant difference.
Made a difference.
Yes.
So, but in postmodern society, you don't have the...
You don't have it, and you have the reluctance of the parishioner to intervene even in children whose behavior in church is not what it should be.
Yeah.
Or they're sitting in front of you and they're not standing up properly. Or if they're kneeling and their bottoms are touching the back of the seat when their bodies should be straight. Or then they should be following through in their Bibles. They're trying to text in their telephones, in their bags. Those of us who see it should be able to touch them.
But you know, Mrs. Garraway, I've read a number of emails from people who aren't able to spell properly.
Oh, and the U for
And
the Y-O-U.
they
and
abbreviate everything.
and it's helping to deteriorate the language. And similarly, those who are speaking, even our leaders, no one would tell them the difference with if I were you and why we say if I were. But you see, a lot has to do with the methodology of the teaching as well.
It has to do
a lot of it
with the methodology of teaching, you think?
Some of it. And the understanding. When you went to school, I'm sure you did parsing and analysis. Oh yeah. I don't think if you say that word to our youngsters, they
would understand
what we are talking about. So it comes back to saying there has to be a balance of keeping what was old, what worked, and of course, improving it with what's new. And every now and then comparing both and saying, how are we doing with this?
But even professional Bahamians, some of them, when you talk to them about syllogism, they don't understand what you're talking about.
Or just remember, we were on a show once.
Yes.
And we differed. And you told me, and I remember I went to a school and I used it. You said, Ms. Garraway, your teachers themselves are not reading.
Yes.
They're not reading. Our people are not reading enough. If you would recall, let me take you back, like in 1994, 95, when there was this whole thrust on literacy. It was really low in this country, no doubt about it. And remember, Elma was the director, I was the deputy director, and C.A. Smith was the Minister of Education, and we started the Let's Read Bahamas.
Yes, I remember.
And we gave emphasis. Well, that produced an improved national grade for language, but it took at least 10 to 12 years to get it. 10 to 12 years. And the emphasis was placed on getting a book in every child's hand, giving additional time to the reading, the development of indigenous reading material, the development of the language, insisting at the secondary school level that reading is a part of every single subject. Vocabulary, and you know, a lot of it is still going on. If you go to CV Bethel now, they have words of the week everywhere.
Yeah, but Mrs. Garraway, we are averse to literacy in this country in a good many ways. And let me tell you why I say so. We don't have a proper library, national library in the Bahamas, you know. We really don't. And when in my boyhood years, I walked from where I lived to the Southern Public Library because I belonged to the library. I borrowed books, and after a week or so, you return the book. That used to happen in my neighborhood, where a number of young boys were members of the library.
Well, look, Mr. Jones.
But we don't have that kind of tradition today.
National library per se.
Yes.
But we do have public libraries in all neighborhoods. We've got a public library.
But are they well equipped?
I have not visited all of them in recent times since I've retired. I've not visited them. But I am sure there, the library in the South Beach area and the Carmichael. I visited the Carmichael in the most recent time. You know, you go to license your car, and I just peep in next door. And it was being fully utilized by students when I was there. There was an extra reading room for homework, and there were some computers that were available, all right? I'm sure they can all do with additional resources, all of them.
Yeah.
But there are libraries. There is one in Elizabeth Estates. There's the Foxhill Library. Of course, there's a library downtown. There's a library
you
on
don't call
Marquis
that thing
Street.
downtown a library, Mrs. Garraway. That is not a library.
It is not at the, it is a library. Don't say it isn't. It is not at the level of the College of the Bahamas' library. It's far from that.
Have you been in the Nassau Public Library lately,
know,
Mrs. Garraway?
I know there are plans on the books to have it modernized and expanded. It will come.
That is an embarrassment, Mrs. Garraway.
It will come, though, Mr. Jones. It will come. And with your agitation.
You know, when I travel, I invariably go into a Barnes and Noble.
Oh, I do, all the time.
And there are scores of people who are sitting, reading,
having their coffee.
having their coffee.
Children in the corner having a little.
Yes, because there's a culture, apparently, of people using our libraries to educate themselves. I don't see that culture
but
in the Bahamas.
This is what we had hoped would have emerged from this whole Let's Read Bahamas initiative that was implemented. That instead of people sitting in the airport, for instance, what are they doing? Peering at a television monitor instead of having a book, or even just a newspaper, if not a book.
Yes.
Reading. We don't have it, but not all of our citizens. It is not as pervasive as it should be, but there are pockets.
Do you know that the Bahamas is one of the countries in the Caribbean where we do not have a Sunday newspaper? And in most, if you go in Barbados or Jamaica or places such, there's a Sunday paper. And the circulation of their newspapers, the numbers, extremely high.
See, they're from a tradition.
Yes.
Of their literacy rate is one of the few that's very, very high and much higher than ours. They're there. That's a tradition. But, Mr. Jones, we don't give up and we don't dwell on what isn't.
Okay.
Let's look at what is. What is? And what is that there exists on this island and on many of the major islands, libraries, but I think the people themselves must begin using it.
Mrs. Garraway, what is a society where people are ill-informed? What is a society where we don't understand civics? What is a society where governance is almost impossible because people are not reading? And what is that we have a discussion for a referendum, for instance, and our people have not read the Constitution that has been around for 41 years, and they don't have no intention of reading the Constitution. What is a society where we do not understand our Constitution?
So, Mr. Jones, look at it like this.
Yes.
Those of us who are in leadership, whether it's in the church, in the home, and we're all leaders in our own homes and leaders of ourselves first, leaders of groups, we have a responsibility to provide the education necessary. I'll give you an example. Saturday last, we had our annual Girl Guide conclave, and this year we decided that we would use the theme fueling the flames of guiding as we are beginning to celebrate our 100th anniversary of guiding in the Bahamas. And we went to our campsite on Marshall Road. Now we would go to a hotel. We said we spent a lot of time and energy ensuring that it's the kind of environment we would want our women to be in and our girls. And one of the main items, a very early item on the agenda, was the whole matter related to the equality of women, because we are a women's organization.
Yes.
And we had the Honorable Teresa Moxie Ingram, who herself is a guide leader now. She leads a group out at Christ the King Anglican Church, Guides, Brownies, Sunflowers, and Rangers. And she spoke to our women. We provided the information. So hopefully, this group of 50-odd women who spent the day with us will go away with new knowledge about the Constitution, a new understanding of those questions, and the overall purpose of what the referendum is trying to achieve. And in fact, one of them asked a question that I never thought of, relating to question number 4, the fourth one, with the equality, giving you those rights. And we're wondering, and we're going to find out, if it is so entrenched that there is the equality, what impact that would have on persons, males wanting to join our organization. We never thought of it, because remember, the Scouts of America, they were challenged with certain matters related to gender.
When you discriminate a particular sex.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So it was very interesting. But again, going back to your original thought, those who are in leadership, I think it is their bounden duty, more than just achieving the aims of that organization, that there should be education, lifelong learning.
You'll pick that point up. Let's take this break here. This is the platform, and one of our favorite guests, Mrs. Elma Garraway, is here today. We'll come right back.